A weak and forgettable series, made just to grab the attention of fans. Well, that's what I thought I would say, but I love this animation. Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're doing well. I'm the Monio, the interdimensional demon who talks about Tomb Raider the most on YouTube, and you're on my channel. I saw a lot of people with very low expectations for this series, and I understand those who thought it would be bad. Netflix has examples of animations that adapt famous franchises, and that work very good, like Terminator Zero, which despite having an interesting ending, is a somewhat generic and forgettable series overall. But completely contrary to my expectations, I found the series to be very good, with a cool adventure and a great development arc for Lara and some subversions of cliches. However, I didn't like some narrative decisions, and I was surprised by the way the series deals with some controversies involving Lara Croft, but let's take it one step at a time. One of the things I liked most visually in the series, and what caught my attention the most in the trailers, is Lara Croft's look, which is simply perfect. Not only is the visual style very beautiful, but I also like the way she is represented, with a more realistic and muscular body, following the line of recent games. I think it would be very easy for the series production to think about creating something in an anime style, and make Lara thin like in the first games, in which she had a very American beauty standard from the 90s, where women were super thin but with huge breasts, and this is also very close to the current Japanese visual beauty standard, which we see a lot in anime, with very thin characters and very thin legs. But the Lara Croft that we see in this series has a much more realistic body in terms of physical capacity, being muscular, with strong arms and thick thighs, but without ceasing to be feminine. And looking at Lara's body, you really believe that she is physically capable of doing the things that are shown in the series. In terms of personality, we have a much more mature Lara than most of her previous versions, and who values people much more, especially her friends, to the point that she remains very focused on her goals, but not to the point of becoming obsessed and acting on impulse, as we saw in some of the recent games. In my opinion, we can safely say that this is one of the best versions of the character in and out of games. She is charismatic, has a sarcastic sense of humor, is very expressive, and has very well-directed scenes that work through her emotional conflicts. The story we have here is very simple. We can say that it is a bit cliché too, but that is not a defect. Basically, there are 4 artifacts, each with a different power. They are obviously scattered around the world, and there is a villain who wants to gather them all to get all the power they contain. The problem is that the combination of these powers causes an imbalance in the world, and it will be up to our beautiful and wonderful Lara to stop this villain and maintain the balance of the world. Yes, speaking like that it sounds quite cliché, but we also have breaks in cliché that I honestly wasn't expecting. For example, we have a character who appears in the first episode, who is Lara's uncle, and the way he is introduced and acts, it is very clear that he will be a villain and that Lara will have to face him. And when he supposedly dies, I believe that he would appear alive at the end, and that he would be behind everything the whole time, manipulating the villain, but that's not what happened. That cliché that we all imagine at the beginning, the writers simply didn't do that, and that surprised me. While I like the break in expectations involving Lara's uncle, this decision completely wastes his character, who could have been very interesting if he had a greater role in the plot, but he is reduced to simply the reason for Lara's trauma, and I understand that this was the price paid for the decision. The writers chose this path and went all the way, and that is commendable. One thing that is somewhat forgettable is the villain. He is not bad, he is operative and fulfills his role, but he is not at all memorable, and when you watch it, you probably won't remember his name, but the script uses him in an interesting way, since at a certain point, a parallel is made between his actions and Lara's, suggesting that they would be in some way very similar in their way of acting and their objectives. One thing that really surprised me was the way the series deals with the fact that Lara is technically a thief, since what she does is basically steal artifacts that belong to the cultural heritage of other countries, and this is not a new discussion. The first Indiana Jones film already dealt with this issue, in which instead of recovering the relics, Indiana took them to a museum in London. Of course, this is not always the case. In the second film of the franchise, Indiana takes the artifact to its true owners, who are the people of an ancient tribe. But in Indiana's case, at least he usually takes the artifacts to museums. Lara, on the other hand, keeps the treasures for herself, which is quite problematic. The way the series deals with this is by admitting what many people insist on denying, that Lara is a thief, and this is admitted by herself in the series, and there is a scene in which the villain starts throwing truths in Lara's face that are quite convincing. One interesting thing to note is that in the Uncharted game, which is also inspired by Indiana Jones, we have a protagonist named Drake, and in this game they have no problem admitting that Drake is a thief and that many of the things he does are not honorable. I like this much more conscious stance of the animation, since we usually don't associate the figure of Lara Croft with something dishonest or unworthy like a thief, and this is interesting from the point of view of the character's lore. One thing that I always hated in the last games, and that I liked in the series, is the fact that Lara is already fully established, being experienced and at the peak of her physical and intellectual abilities. For me, one of the biggest mistakes of the last Tomb Raider games is wanting to tell Lara's origin story and presenting us with an inexperienced character, with the eternal promise that one day she will become the badass Lara Croft that everyone loves, but that never happens. The latest news about the next Tomb Raider game suggests that the next game will be another reboot, and I would hate to have to see Lara's story again at the beginning of her career. I hope they follow the animation's lead and make an experienced Lara, which is what all fans want to see. The series balances humor and drama very well, with light moments interspersed with moments of emotional conflict. Lara is dealing with the trauma of losing her uncle, and she is on a journey to end her mourning, but along the way she realizes that this was not the answer and begins to rethink her goals and give new meaning to several things, including her relationship with her friends. I think this journey of overcoming, maturing and self-knowledge is the highlight of the series, and it is very well executed throughout the 8 episodes, without being forced or rushed. One curious thing is that the series has 8 episodes, but the villain is defeated in episode 7, and then you wonder what will happen in the 8th episode, and we have the 8th episode being one of the coolest, with an atmosphere similar to some of the great moments of old games in the series, with many references and really cool fan service that old fans of the franchise will really enjoy. The visual quality of the series, in general, is good, with a very beautiful look of the characters and environments, and fluid animation in action scenes. There are some moments when the visual quality drops, and you understand that those are scenes in which the animators saved money to compensate in other scenes that needed better animation, but these fluctuations do not happen very often. We can say that in 80% of the scenes the quality is very good. The actress who plays Lara Croft in the original is Hayley Atwell, of whom I am a big fan, and she uses a very English accent for her interpretation of Lara, which overall I liked, despite having some reservations in some scenes. Tomb Raider Legend of Lara Croft is a fun and respectful series for fans of the franchise, and in my opinion, it is also a good entry point for those who have never played the games, with a simple story and a charismatic and well-developed protagonist within the series proposal. But what about you? What did you think of Netflix's Tomb Raider? Do you agree with me? Leave it in the comments, and if you liked the video, subscribe to follow the next content. Until next time my people, demonic hugs.